Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week. This is a show where I review all the comics I've read this week in one show. We go least favorite to best pick of the week and everything in between. And at the end of the video, we discuss the viewer's pick of the week. So in the comments below, definitely give me your pick of the week. Now, before we get started, I do have the Kickstarter for my comic book, Haunting, Like Father, Like Daughter. It's a crossover between Haunting, which is about a 13-year-old boy who has ghosts following him, and then Like Father, Like Daughter is about a high school girl. Father left her to become a full-time superhero. Everyone in the world loves him except for her, and then she inherits his abilities. And in this story, we get to see both characters interact with each other at a Halloween dance go awry with zombies and ghosts and superheroes. So definitely go check that out. Now, diving into the review this week, we have 12 books, which is a pretty moderate size for me for books these days. So let's get into the countdown here. So number 12 for me is, I guess, this weekly book at this point for this arc, and that is The Amazing Spider-Man issue 48. So we just had last issue last week, and now we have a new issue. And I enjoyed half this issue. I really liked, or really like is a strong saying, but I enjoyed the Betty and Ned stuff. I do think there was a ton of exposition there that I didn't quite like, but I enjoyed at least learning what happened to Ned, right? Even if a lot of it was just redescribing past events. But then once Peter leaves, that's when I felt like the book went a little down for me. I wasn't as interested in the story. So once he leaves Betty and Ned's conversation, then even the Teresa stuff, which is the chameleon side of the story, is not really dived into too much with this issue. It's only a few pages. So overall, I feel like they could have focused on things that had a bit more of a plot-heavy storyline, like the Betty stuff, instead of rushing into this more action side with Spider-Man. And also the artwork is just okay. I think it's decent, but you could definitely tell you kind of have a revolving door of artists when it comes to these weekly books, and that's why I'm not like a huge fan of weekly titles in general or weekly arcs in general. So I'm giving that 2.5 stars, and that is number 12. So moving on to number 11, which is Iron Man issue 9. So they really sidestepped the story. Last issue, I believe, was the Hellcat-centric issue, which I really liked. I like Hellcat, and obviously this writer likes Hellcat, and that's prevalent here. And this one was about Korvac. So we haven't seen Iron Man in a long time. This is his book, just as a reminder. And in this issue, it's really a history lesson on Korvac and what he's been up to and why I guess he's doing what he's doing. And honestly, I think the part I enjoyed the least about this book is Korvac. I don't really quite care about his character. I like the Hellcat story. I like Iron Man. I love the artwork for this book. I think Cafu does a great job. But diving into this and seeing the original Human Torch just wasn't in my wheelhouse. I'm sure for people who enjoy those characters, they'll enjoy this issue, but it just wasn't towards my preferences. So I'm going to give that 2.5 stars, and that is number 11. Moving on to number 10, which is the only Hellfire Gala issue I got this week, and that is X-Men issue 21. So I know last week I said that I would be reviewing all the Hellfire Gala issues, and I started looking at Excalibur in the store. I'm like, this looks like just the series. It doesn't look like you need to read these other parts. Kind of like X of Swords, I feel like did a good job where every part felt like, as an X-Men fan, you had to read it. Not just if you're an Excalibur fan, you have to read it. And I don't think Hellfire Gala has done that yet because it's focusing so much on the central cast that is only part of that series. So I decided to skip Excalibur. Also, I don't really like Children of the Atom, another book I kind of looked through. Didn't really see too connected to Hellfire Gala, even though it's in the back checklist. So I skipped that one as well. We'll see as these issues come out what I end up picking up besides the books I usually pick up. But also in the back in the chart, there's like these red marks of, I'm guessing, bigger books. X-Men obviously being one of them, the Giant Size being another, and Sword being another one. So maybe I'll pick up Sword in probably the last part of this event, but I don't know if I'm going to pick up all the parts is the point. Anyways, diving into the actual issue, which is X-Men issue 21. This one was okay for me. It did move the plot a little bit more, where we get to see this kind of psychic link that the X-Men trying to create with their guests, and a bit of build up there. Also a big moment, but if you follow comic book news, you already knew this moment is the announcement of who the new X-Men team was, and I enjoyed just the splash of that. So the splash page was pretty cool. But the announcement itself wasn't a surprise because we already knew the team. We already know where that's going. So it kind of felt like it was just going with the motions. And then there's some fun interactions here and there. Kevin Feige's in the issue, and Cyclops talks about why he's taking this new direction of philosophy with the X-Men and Krakoa, so that was interesting. So there's definitely parts I liked, and I love Doderman's artwork, which was most of the issue, but not the whole issue, so that was a little topsy-turvy there, because that beginning style was very different from Doderman's artwork. But overall, okay issue. I'm not loving the Hellfire Gala. I love the clothes, but I don't really think the plot's been moving that quickly. And like I said, these parts are not as connected as I thought they would be, and they're definitely more series driven than overall event driven, and take that with what you will. Maybe some people like that a little bit more than others. So I'm going to give that 3 stars, and that is number 10. So moving on to number 9, which is Babyteeth issue 18. This is like the third to last issue of this book, which is so interesting. I didn't really know it was coming to an end this soon. But at least we're going to finally get the final arc with no interruptions, knock on wood, hopefully. And this issue actually was a little slower than I expected, especially leading into the penultimate. It really is just the family getting back together, and there's definitely some good emotional moments between Heather and our main character, Sadie. So I enjoyed that probably the most, but there's times where I'm like, oh, is the issue over yet? Like, once they got to the grave, I thought that would have been like a good final moment. Like, the pacing was a little off for me with this issue. I think there's moments that were a little bit too prolonged. But we also dig into the new children of Satan, so that's another aspect we get to see, but not much movement of it. There's a lot of mention of it. So hopefully next issue, the penultimate issue, we get a lot more plot progression. And I enjoyed last issue a little bit more for that. But this was still a good character-driven issue, and there's parts I enjoyed to it, and the artwork is still gritty as hell, and excited to see where it ends. So overall, I'm giving that 3 stars, and that is number 9. Moving on to number 8. This one is a little lower than issue 1, and that is Justice League The Last Ride, issue 2. So this is somewhat of an explanation what was going on in the past, and what brought Batman and Superman to have this sever in their relationship, and that being Martian Manhunter's death. And we don't really get to see the death yet. I'm sure as issues go on, we'll get more of the past and more flashbacks, but we're seeing the lead up to that. And then there's just pieces to the puzzle of what's going on in the present and how that's being compared to these flashbacks. A little slow moving, like I said, just because they're trying to deal with the flashbacks and information that we kind of already have because of what was dropped last issue, and us knowing that Martian Manhunter has already died, and we just don't know how. And again, there's little teases of how that happened, but not enough that I feel like really moved this issue too much. But overall, I still enjoyed the character interactions, the drama, the tension between everybody. The artwork's really solid as well, especially if you're not currently reading the Justice League, which has had a very different vibe of maybe what you're used to with the normal Justice League, or the regular roster you usually would have. So I like that this kind of feels like a filler Justice League in some way if you enjoy the more traditional Justice League. And I enjoyed that aspect with the kind of Injustice Gods Among Us 2.0 twist to it. A little bit more of a calmer version of that, but it's also a different take. So I've been enjoying it, but like I said, I enjoyed the first issue a bit more. So I'm gonna give that one 3 stars, and that is number 8. So I am moving on to number 7, which is Mighty Morphin issue 8. So this is a kind of the ending of a battle between Zed and his crew, which also includes Matt. And I guess out of the coincidence, it includes Matt and Grace and even Billy, and then our other Power Rangers. And it's really our Power Rangers like Matt and Billy kind of realizing, okay, what side am I on? Am I doing the right thing by doing all, teaming up with Zed and trying to do what's best for the world, but maybe not what's best for my friends. So there's some interesting character interactions here. I kind of wish there was a little bit more. There's a lot of action in this issue, but it is like a final battle type issue where does everything calm down? I don't think so, but there's definitely a lot of things that get somewhat resolved in some way, or at least mentioned, like Billy, again, helping Matt and Grace was very interesting, and I really loved Zordon's conversation there with Billy. And then Matt wanting to do everything in his power for his friends to trust him again, but can his friends trust him? And again, that goes towards Billy as well. So I'm curious how the next arc will take that now that we're not in so much of an action part of the issue. But overall, artwork was pretty solid for this book. It was a little chaotic with, again, a lot of the action here, but still a pretty well-balanced issue that gets me more excited for the upcoming issues than maybe this issue in particular. So I'm giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 8. Moving on to... That was number 7, sorry. Moving on to number 6, which is DC Pride, issue 1. I was super excited for this issue. I love that both DC and Marvel are celebrating Pride Month in more ways than one, but also giving us an anthology. I will say that there's more characters in the Marvel Pride anthology that I have a bigger connection to, so I'm curious which one I'm gonna enjoy the most. But this one I thought was pretty solid, honestly. There were certain characters that, again, I don't really have too much of a connection with, so I wasn't as again connected to those stories. So like Midnighter, I don't really know much about the character. Constantine, I'm not like a huge fan of the character, but the characters I really liked. I enjoyed their stories. Like I really enjoyed Jess Chambers as a character, even though we've only seen them in like 2 issues. That is one of the best parts of Future State was them, and then also Aquaman and Aquaman's daughter. So seeing a whole story of them together, I love that one. I thought that was great. And then I love Harley and Poison Ivy. I love their relationship. And I enjoy that the regular Batman books have been doing a lot more with it. And then also seeing something like this and them actually talk about their relationship. I really, really enjoyed that one. And also pleasantly surprised with Batwoman. I shouldn't say pleasantly surprised. She's a great character. But I really liked that as an opener. And seeing how she related her queerness with her relationship with her sister, I thought was really interesting. And also another great tidbit is that you could 100% tell that queer writers wrote this. There's especially some language in the Poison Ivy story that... Especially there's a lot of language in all the stories, but the one that caught my eye was in Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn in the end, where 2 queer characters say, oh yeah, they're totally U-hauling, which in queer language just means like 2 girls that rush into a relationship, and it's like kind of a trope / cliche. So I was like, oh, that was kind of cool, where you could again tell that a queer writer wrote that and added some language from queer culture, which I thought was cool. So overall, I like this one. Anthologies are so hard to review, though. I always say this with every anthology. You might really like 2 stories, or you might not be totally engaged in another, and that somewhat happened in the Pride issue. Again, there are some stories like Midnighter where I wasn't as engaged. I felt like the Alan Scott one was a little long, but still a good story. So overall, I'm going to give that 3.5 stars. I still, obviously think it's an important book, and I'm so happy DC did this. And I'm happy that they're celebrating Pride Month in general. I'm excited to get some more covers as well, especially that Nightwing one. And excited to see what Marvel's going to do with their Pride anthology at the end of the month. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 6. I'm actually a little disappointed it didn't make my top 5 this week, but we will see again for the Marvel anthology. So moving on to number 5, speaking of anthologies, kind of, that is Batman Urban Legends. I say kind of because some of these stories are continued and some aren't. So, and also I'm going to actually talk about 2 stories that somewhat queer-baited some of these characters. It was interesting, the same week that DC Pride came out, there are 2 stories where I feel like they queer baited us, and I'll discuss that a little bit more as we go on. But anyways, Batman Urban Legends being one of them. So there's a Tim Drake story, which is going to continue, and that's why I was on my spiel about how this is kind of an anthology and kind of not. So like the Batwing story, which was written by the actor who plays Batwing on Batwoman, he wrote a story, and that was like a one shot. We still have Grifter going on. That's been, going on for a couple of parts, and that will end. Then something will replace it. And then same thing for Jason Todd. Jason Todd's story has been so good. I love it. This is actually a little slower than usual, but I still love the language, and I love the relationship between Jason and Batman, and I just really enjoy that story, and will buy Batman Urban Legends just for that story sometimes. But I also am a huge fan of the Bat family, so there's always at least one other character I really like Tim Drake. And Tim Drake's story was really interesting. So we get to see a whole narrative of, okay, I've always been stuck in my ways. I'm always so busy with my hero work. I don't really know where to go next with my life. And there's like all these questions he has. And then in the end, you have this guy that he goes out to dinner with from, I guess, a previous Robin issue from years ago. I don't really remember him, honestly, and I have read his Robin series. I don't remember the character. And it feels like a date. It totally feels like a date. And again, some of the language that was talked about previously before that date, it felt kind of queer-baited to me. And, Tim Drake is definitely a character that has been queer-coded a lot, so it was kind of weird. If they were doing that, then do it, I don't want to really just be queer baited, especially during Pride Month, or I don't know. I'm curious to see where it ends up going. Maybe it's just me picking up on things that wasn't necessarily being written, but it's something I recognize, and I'm curious to see where they end up going with it. So I enjoyed that story, though. I'm curious again to see where that story goes, and what exactly the main story is for Tim Drake there. And also, I guess Stephanie and Tim have broken up, so that was interesting. I didn't know they broke up off panel. So will that be mentioned other places? We'll have to see as well. Also, that kind of ties into why I thought he was on a date with that guy, or also they mentioned about paying. There was a lot there that just felt very baited there. So I'm overall giving that issue 3.5 stars. I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the Tim story. I enjoyed the Jason Todd story. I'm not a huge Grifter fan, so I didn't quite love that one as much. And the Batwing story was okay. I'm not also a huge fan of Batwing, or at least I don't know as much about the character. I've seen him team up with Batman and stuff, but never really followed his solo stuff. So I thought that story was okay. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, speaking of Batman, is Detective Comics issue 1037. So this issue, again, kind of point A, point B, a little slower than we usually get, but I thought it was pretty well-rounded, because this issue we get to see Batman or Bruce Wayne be accused of murder of all these women, because he's just kind of tied into situations of when they died in the area and previous talk to these women. So we also have Mr. Worth, who wants to kill Bruce Wayne. It also seems like Bruce Wayne just kind of revealed that he was Batman in front of him, so I don't know where that's going. But I like the build-up towards it. I like that he's kind of involved as Bruce and Batman in this case, and also, of course, on the side, having Huntress and Oracle help as well. I've been enjoying this arc overall. I've been really liking it. And then even the backup story with the detective I thought was really cool, and just hearing another point of view about Batman and old money in Gotham I thought was interesting. And then there's the John Ridley story was cool as well. I didn't expect a third backup story. Maybe it was a little bit too much for a third backup story. Maybe that would have been good for Urban Legends, but it was a solid backup in general. But and cool to see Lucius Fox, because we haven't seen that character appear in the Batman stuff since the beginning of Tynian's Batman run, and I've missed him in the stories and hearing his voice. So like I said, giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 4. So moving on to number 3, which is American Vampire 1976 issue 9. And we are leading towards the end of this whole series, and I really enjoyed this. It was the lead up to the final battle, and all our vampires are trying to defeat the big bad here. And I love the dialogue of Skinner and him kind of leaving this last letter, which we have seen with Pearl's deceased husband when he was still alive. There's these letters of him talking about his life with Pearl, and it very much plays a part in previous American Vampire stories, and just seeing Skinner and Pearl's connection in general has been really interesting. And seeing Skinner become the hero, you know, he was always this anti-hero, so to see him kind of take the lead here and what he becomes in the end, this kind of bigger monster to defeat our big bad, was fun. And overall, I enjoyed this one. I think it's a good lead up as we head towards the end for this one, where I really just don't know where it's gonna go. So I'm giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 3. Moving on to number 2, which is Night-Gwen issue 1. And this was the other book I was talking about, like somewhat queer baiting us on this one, where this is nothing to do with Gwen Stacy. I don't even think her name is Gwen Stacy here. The only kind of relation we get to see with Gwen is the Jackal stuff. There's definitely reminiscing, but Jackal stuff, Flash Thompson's reference, and then they switch the parents' narrative. So, you know, Gwen's dad ends up dying, and then also, I guess her mother, they don't really reference her death, but she's definitely inspired by her mom to do what she does instead of her dad, like she is as Spider-Gwen. And then I guess also some 616 stuff is mixed in here, because again, Gwen's dad died here, like the regular universe stuff. So with this story, we get to see Gwen as a therapist in kind of an Arkham Asylum, Ravencroft building. She lives her life to try to help people because that's what her mom did. Then there's some, again, extreme queer baiting between Misty Knight and this version of Gwen Stacy. They're kind of going on a date. There's a lot of flirting between the two, but they never really say anything. They very much apply it. Gwen says no to a lot of men, and that's kind of the whole story, is that Flash Thompson wants to be with her, and she doesn't want to be with him, and all these men want to, like, be with Gwen, and she doesn't want any of these men. So it's just like, that's pretty much the whole story of the book as well. So I just kind of wish they just said, you know, that they are gonna go out, or, you know, Misty Knight and Gwen. Again, it just felt a little baity, especially since we don't know if we're gonna get more of this character at all. Maybe in the Heroes Reborn bigger book we'll get more story there, but I kind of feel like this would have been better off if it was a miniseries. I actually thought there was parts that felt a little rushed, but the things that were played out here were really interesting, like seeing a different side of Jackal and the twist of Flash Thompson being Jackal. I really liked Gwen's voice. I enjoyed seeing a very different perspective from her, of her being a doctor. It felt very different from 616 Gwen Stacy, and of course Spider-Gwen. So I liked it. I enjoyed it. You don't need to read Heroes Reborn to get into it, but I also just kind of wanted more. I think that actually would have benefited as a 4-issue miniseries like we saw in King of Black. We had a lot of miniseries. I think this would have been better off to be that. Artwork was a little rushed in my opinion as well. It was a little scratchy here. But moving on to my number 1 pick, which is The Joker, issue 4. This was a really solid read. It's so hard to say what's my favorite Batman book going on right now, because Batman's been doing some awesome stuff. Again, I just talked about Urban Legends and how every issue feels like a surprise, because a different character is always being featured. At least one different character is always being featured. You have Batman going on with so many great new characters. You have Detective Comics with some great mystery and great actual detective work. And then you have the Joker, which breaks down a character that deserves the spotlight, and that is Jim Gordon. And that's exactly what happens here too, is that it breaks down that character. Is he a good guy? What does it mean to be a good guy? And does he want to kill the Joker? And it's the Joker playing mind games throughout the whole entire issue, and Jim having a chance to kill him and not being able to pull the trigger, and the torture the Joker will put Jim through. And it's just really lovely how they lay it out in this issue. And then we have some good Oracle, Stephanie, and Cassandra moments, and digging into the mystery of the Court of Owls, even though they don't know they're digging into the Court of Owls, and this the bigger leader that's ahead of Jim's case here. So overall, I thought it was a really good issue, very solid, obviously very gritty artwork, and I've been just really enjoying this book a lot, and just a different perspective we've been getting between Jim and the Joker in general. So I'm giving that 4 stars, and that is my pick of the week. Let me know in the comments below what was your pick of the week, and the viewer's pick of the week from last week was A Nice House on the Lake. So speaking of James Tynion, that was the pick of the week from last week, and here are some comments about that. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Definitely follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Go check out my comics like Father Like Daughter and They Call Her a Dancer. And every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time is Comic Book Weekly, where we discuss our favorite comics and comic book news. Thanks, guys. Bye.